I believe we're live.
All right.
All right, so welcome everyone to the Money Masters Twitter space. I'm Dave, and
And I'm Noah. Yep, I'm Noah.
and today we got a fun one in store as we talk about everyone's favorite topic, budgeting. But first, it would be rude of us not to introduce ourselves, what we do at Money Masters, and our brief hiatus for everyone that has been listening to us from the beginning. We haven't been on our usual time of 2 p.m. Swiss time, 8 a.m. Eastern time. So, let's get right into it. So, first off, I am Dave. I'm a project manager here at Money Masters. I'm Canadian that finds myself out in Switzerland at the moment. I'm a master's student in finance, and I am here with.
This is Noah, and I work on the content development here at Money Masters.
And what does the content development do at Money Masters?
That's a great question. So we primarily focus on the Academy. So listen to this, be sure to download the Money Masters app and check out the Academy. It's where we provide bite-sized lessons covering a lot of financial topics between personal finance, corporate finance, investing, and we really make sure that we eliminate a lot of the jargon. So it doesn't matter if you've been, studying finance for 30 years or you've never touched the subject before. We believe that anyone and everyone can get something out of the Money Masters Academy.
And with the Academy, we also have an add-on. So to add on from obviously our great content and the articles and the blogs, we also have the Money Masters Arena. And the Money Masters Arena is a fantasy stock investing game where you get 100,000 fantasy dollars to invest in a real-time stock simulation. And within this simulation, you can take as many stocks as you want. You enter them into the tournament for either the day, week, or month. And at the end of each tournament session, you have the opportunity to win real vouchers from some of your favorite brands if your portfolio performs well. And now, I believe it's time that we get into this week's topic.
Let's do it.
Everyone's favorite, budgeting. So, basically, when you look online, you're going to find that the definition of budgeting is an estimate of income and expenditures for a set period of time. But if you want to just take it from a normal person's perspective and get rid of some of the lingo, it's basically tracking how much you spend each month and comparing it to your income. So, no, I know you know a little bit more about the topic, so you want to talk about it a little bit?
Sure. So first off, we really find here at Money Masters budgeting is really important, and that's why you're going to find budgeting nearly at the very beginning. It's actually our third lesson of the first module in the Academy. Personal Finance 101, third line in there, budgeting. But yeah, so the breakdown is going to be your income and against your expenses, and then that is going to break down into what are your wants, what are your needs, and what are your savings. Now, we use a lot of methods here at Money Masters, and it all depends on individually the person. But Dave, let's talk about those needs, wants, and savings. What would you give some examples as for needs?
So for needs, I would obviously say housing. So my rent each month is clearly a need. After that, you have food and water and stuff like that. Transportation,
Yep.
That would all be considered a need for me.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, so it's a lot of the essentials. So your essential foods, even things like your essential clothing, right? We all need underwear and socks. The bare essentials of covering that counts as your needs. But now going from that, what might you classify as your wants?
So this one's always tricky because whenever people ask me what I want, I always say I want a Lamborghini, but that's not within my income at the moment. So wants for me would be going out to nice restaurants, going out to bars with friends, taking day trips around the country that we live in. Obviously, we live in beautiful Switzerland at the moment. So all of that sort of stuff would be considered a want for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great example with the Lamborghini. Especially if you might be listening from the United States, it's a very car-centric infrastructure. So, you might actually justify that the basic car, as transportation, that might qualify as a need. But if, you want to make sure you're rolling around a Lamborghini, that's not exactly the easy or the simplest way to do that. And that definitely falls more under a want.
Obviously, it comes with a much higher price tag than your average Toyota Corolla or something like that, which gets you from point A to point B just as easily.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of things you got to be honest with yourself about this that we could spend hours debating and talking about. Because there's a lot of things like, going out to restaurants, that's going to be a want. But your basic food needs, that's obviously a need. Same thing like clothing. You can have a basic need of clothing. And at the same time, if you want that new Louis Vuitton something or another, that's gonna be a want. And so you got to be honest with yourself about what it is. There's always a great adage to always put your needs before your wants, and you'll be okay. That's very true here with your budgeting. And so finally, the last category here in terms of expenses is going to be savings. So what do you think is in savings?
I would think it's the word itself, saving things and investing. I think investing is a very important thing that we put on top of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things with savings is people think, oh, it must be just savings. But actually, it's kind of like it's your kind of financial position. So here with savings, we're not just talking about putting money aside in the bank, but it's also paying off debts, it's putting money into investing, and then obviously, of course, just putting it into your savings account.
Mhm.
So it all depends on what you do. Now, there's a lot of ratios. We like everyone to make sure that they understand their own income levels to make sure that you're doing it the best you can. The Money Masters app, when you download it, you will find that in the lesson we use the example of 50, 20, 30. That means 50% of income goes into your needs, 20% into savings, and 30% into the wants.
Mhm.
So, but again, this depends on, you need to look at your own income and determine what you're reasonably able to do. We know that, as you grow in income, you get more wiggle room, and you can and make further adjustments more into savings or wants.
Mhm.
But that's just something you have to look at. So, David, how did you start budgeting?
So for me, it's a very interesting question. I know that we're gonna get into a little bit of Money Masters story time here with Dave and Noah, where we kind of speak about how we really started this path. But for me, it kind of all started when I was in college. Honestly, I think one of the best things for me was becoming a little bit more independent. I didn't before it was always I had my mom and dad around and they would kind of give me some advice here or there. But
Yeah.
within my first year of college was really when I started to take control of my finances. Obviously, there was a rough transitionary period my first semester of college where I was like, oh, I have enough money in my bank account right now from working summer jobs and doing stuff of that nature to kind of spend whatever I want. But then slowly, as the number in your account starts going down, you realize that that can't last forever,
Yeah.
especially when you're a student. So this is why we are talking about this subject actually, because June is meant for recent grads. If you follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter, we're just talking about recent grads and things that you should know, but this one can also fall into the current students. But yeah, so it all really started there, and I kind of just went with pen and paper at the beginning, slowly transitioned over to Excel, looked at what the income I was previously had from summer jobs beforehand. And then I kind of used it so that I could actually allocate portions to my need, which was my rent at the time,
Mhm.
food, clothing, obviously, and my wants, which was going out with friends, and then saving. I knew that I needed to save some. At this point, I didn't have as much income as I would have liked to because I was a student. Very difficult to be a full time student and have a full time job. So what I did was I would actually allocate some of my previous portions of savings for when I turned 18 to actually begin investing. And that's kind of how my journey started with budgeting. Obviously, I wish I would have known what I know now, going back 5 to 6 years, but not always the case. How
No.
about you, Noah? How'd you get started with it?
Yeah, kind of same boat. You always find yourself early on, especially as a young professional. Out of college, even then I didn't have a good control of my budget, and it kind of took me to just kind of realizing I was in really that monthly anxiety of at the beginning of the month when you get your paychecks in, you're feeling relaxed, and by the end of it, you're feeling anxiety. And I got really tired of that kind of month to month, paycheck to paycheck. Um, and so actually for me personally, the first step I took was I went to my bank and I actually had them print out for me my expenses,
Mm-hmm.
and just show what the transactions I was doing every month. And it's a little, $10 there, $20 there. It's those little things that for me I
Add
was
up.
noticing they really added up for me. And I was thinking to myself, like, I could save a lot of money if I just simply, cook from home more, prep my meals for lunch or for work. It was little small changes I could make that would make big impacts in my overall budget. And also making sure that I prioritize, like, right when I got paid, I set up an automatic savings
Mm-hmm.
so that the second my bank said, oh, once there was an amount like over a certain amount, the bank knew the automatic to say, okay, remove a certain percentage for savings.
Mm-hmm.
And then that kind of automated it. So for me, it was not necessarily like one massive thing, but it was making small adjustments
Mm-hmm.
and automating that process is kind of how it worked. Now that took me, a couple years out of college to
Mm-hmm.
actually start getting into a process of stuff, and then, it's all about management from there.
Mm-hmm. Of course. And one thing that a lot of people do fall into the trap of, especially when they first get a job, is when you come out of university where you're just kind of, I know it's a cliche, the broke college student, It really is true for a lot of people, especially with the debt problem that's currently going on in the United States. And you get your first paycheck and you want to live a different sort of lifestyle.
Yeah.
And you can to a certain extent. However, oftentimes you find a lot of people wanting more than what they need. And this is where we kind of get into the spiral of credit card debt and
Yeah.
things like that, which is why we think it is very important here at Money Masters that you kind of gauge your financial situation right when you get your first job or you find a way to come into some money and you plan out a budget so that everything can kind of transition seamlessly for you.
Yeah.
Is kind of our topic. So, and kind of the point that we're trying to make whenever we do one of these Twitter spaces, to be very careful with your money because it's not always going to be there if you spend carelessly. And now we just want to kind of get into why is having a budget important. So Noah, what would be a couple reasons for you why you think it's important?
Yeah, money coming in is always real slow, and money leaving is always really fast and really easy. We are tempted every day to spend money on everything. And you always tell yourself, well, maybe I can make that expense, or because if you don't have a budget, you're gonna tell yourself, like, and I do this all the time, if I'm not careful, how quickly it is to say, like, oh, I can afford that, or like I have enough money in my account to cover that. Not thinking of like, yeah, but I also have expenses for another 2 weeks I have to cover.
Yep.
And completely, because you're gonna always usually underestimate. At least in my experience, I've always underestimated what my future expenses are going to be versus. Especially and overthink what my income is going to be. I think maybe we're all a little prone to that. So I think that's the big thing is when you got a budget, you're much more real with yourself, and actually it empowers you to sort of limit and say like, nope, following the plan, follow the plan.
Yeah, of course, and that's something that we see all the time, especially working in an office setting. We have the opportunity where we can make lunch at home and then come here, but instead we find ourselves oftentimes going to the grocery store, getting those pre-packaged meals for $11 pop.
Yep.
And that's something that can really add up if you take that over a 30-day span. Obviously, $300 down the drain, just like that. So that's one of the reasons why we think it is very important to budget. A couple other ones that we actually found interesting when we're looking at other kind of business analysts speaking about this topic and kind of how vital it is to your personal finance is first a topic that we've already covered. It helps ensure you don't spend money that you don't have. We do think this is one of the most important things. Second, this could significantly help your retirement planning. And this is something that I'm sure not a lot of people think about at the age that we are at right now. Obviously, we're still young working professionals and it seems so far away, but think about if you did just make that meal from home or you didn't buy that Louis Vuitton bag that you were talking about. That could possibly be a couple extra $1,000 that you could put towards investing in a stable stock or ETF. And then that would grow over time at compounding interest, which is always key to growing your wealth. After that, we also need to think about having an emergency fund. You'd be surprised at how many people actually don't have an emergency fund because they don't budget. They think that when there's money in their account, this means that they're fine, but you need to take in that you have to do that savings aspect of it and put a little bit off to the side every month rather than spending it all. And finally, budgeting can also help you get out of debt. I'm sure this is something that not a lot of people think about with budgeting, but actually it has a lot of pros to it in this aspect because when you are making those savings in the end, you can put it towards your debt obligations that you have from college. Obviously, as we talked about with Noah a couple of weeks ago, within the United States, there is a huge student debt problem. And also, one other thing that we now need to consider more than ever is inflation. It is very important to start investing as soon as you can. What was that Warren Buffett quote we actually were just talking about? The one that David said.
Oh, where the best day to invest is today.
Yeah, it's all the best day to invest is today. And with inflation being as high as it is right now, I believe it's great.
Yeah, and actually, I love that point on kind of securing the debt because how many of us, for example, if you have carryover credit card debt, your credit card company is just going to say, just pay the minimum $25, $30, whatever, and keep it going. And you might think to yourself, oh, that's no big deal. I'll pay it off whenever. When you're not realizing is you're paying a lot of interest. And when you actually budget, especially against debt, you really can then think to yourself, maybe I can afford $75, $100, and then you're going to be paying a lot more on principal. And it all comes down to knowledge is power here. When you budget, you really get a great picture of what your finance position looks like,
Mhm.
and that helps you kind of look out to what it can basically put you in a better long-term position than to simply, go by the wind and see how you end up. That's not going to get you to your goals.
And actually, we recently did a presentation at IFM Business School in Geneva, and one of our colleagues, Ekta, she actually asked the question about when credit card debt starts accumulating.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised at how many people thought that because you pay the minimum every month, it means that the interest doesn't bear on the rest.
No, that's not true.
And it's not. And that's
That's not
something
true,
that some
no.
of those students learned there on the spot, which I hope they don't have any credit card debt, because that is the worst kind that you could get because of the high interest payments. But it does show that if you budget, and also if you use the Money Masters app, that you can find out some of these little tips and tricks that will really help you out in the long run.
Absolutely. So I think that's a great lesson on budgeting.
Yeah.
Again, be sure everyone check it out in the Personal Finance 101 module on the Money Masters app right there. First thing, third line of the Academy. Check that out as soon as you can.
And with that, I believe we went over time by a minute, but we thank you all for listening today. And next week, we will be back to our regularly scheduled programming at 2 p.m. local time, 8 a.m. Eastern. We will be talking to
Keyless Aesthetics, a startup company here in Switzerland.
Yeah, and so make sure to tune in for next week's Twitter Space. And we thank you all for listening today. So from Dave
and Noah,
take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.